Electromagnetic quiet is the pillar I approach with the greatest candor because candor is worth more here than confidence. Pillar 5 of the 9 pillars of wellness design concerns the fields that pass invisibly through every modern home, from mobile masts and routers to the wiring behind the plaster. Clients arrive convinced that their fatigue must be electromagnetic, and the honest answer, more often than not, is that the evidence for that belief is considerably weaker than they have been led to believe by the internet. I would rather explain that plainly than sell reassurance dressed as certainty. This is a design conversation about measurement, proportion, and sleep, not a conversation conducted in the language of fear. Begin with the evidence itself, because everything that follows depends on reading it honestly. A prospective study following nearly 1,000 participants found no clear link between ordinary residential radiofrequency exposure and self-reported sleep quality, and a more recent double-blind study examining the same question under controlled conditions reached a similarly measured conclusion. The picture for low-frequency magnetic fields, the kind produced by building wiring and transformers, is no more alarming. A review of the clinical literature found the evidence connecting these fields to melatonin secretion inconsistent, with no reliable dose-response relationship established across the studies examined. Inconsistent is the honest word. Not disproven, not confirmed, simply unresolved. And a good designer says so rather than pretending otherwise. So why does thoughtful electromagnetic design remain part of a serious wellness brief when the underlying science is this equivocal? 3 reasons, and none of them rests on a medical claim I am prepared to make. A growing number of households request it, and they deserve to have it engineered properly rather than fitted with stickers and pendants sold on fear by people who cannot explain the mechanism in the language of physics. A meaningful subset of people report genuinely disturbed sleep in high-exposure environments, and whatever the underlying mechanism turns out to be, they are the ones obliged to sleep there tonight. And most of what a competent electromagnetic program actually does in practice, hardwiring data, tidying electrical work, removing chargers from the bedside table, relocating a router away from the headboard wall, produces a quieter and better built house regardless of what the fields themselves are doing to anyone. That third reason is the one I find most defensible of all, and it is the one I lead with. The word electromagnetic covers 3 quite different phenomena, and treating them as a single problem is why most domestic advice on the subject is close to useless. Radio frequency, in the megahertz to gigahertz range, arrives from mobile masts, handsets, wireless routers, cordless telephone bases, and every connected device a household has gathered over the years without much thought. This is what most people mean when they use the word, and it is fortunately the easiest of the 3 to address, since distance and hardwiring do the greater part of the work on their own, without any specialist product being purchased at all. Extremely low-frequency magnetic fields, at the frequency of the domestic electrical supply itself, come from building wiring, distribution boards, transformers, and underfloor heating systems. These fields are considerably harder to shield, since magnetic fields pass through most ordinary building materials with relative ease. Distance and correct wiring practice are the only reliable remedies available, which makes this a design problem to be solved at the drawing board rather than a product to be purchased afterwards. Dirty electricity, meaning high-frequency transients riding on the building's own circuits, is generated by dimmer switches, switched-mode power supplies, and the low-quality drivers found in a great many modern light fittings. It is the category clients have almost never heard of, and frequently the one where a proper survey finds something genuinely worth correcting. A worthwhile survey measures all 3 in every room where someone sleeps, at the height of the pillow rather than in the middle of the floor, and over a period long enough to catch a neighbor's inverter starting or a mast quietly adjusting its output overnight.
A brief walk around a bedroom with a handheld meter, however confidently performed, is closer to theater than to engineering, and it should not be mistaken for a genuine assessment of the room. The sequence for reducing exposure is unambiguous once the survey is complete, and it runs from cheapest to most expensive for good reason. Address the source first. Hardwire everything capable of being hardwired, from televisions to workstations to wireless access points, which produces a faster and more reliable network in the process and tends to make the case for itself. Replace cordless telephone bases that transmit continuously in many common models. Remove the mobile handset from the bedside altogether. These changes cost very little and accomplish a great deal for the sleeping household. Distance is the second, and pound for pound, the most cost-effective lever available to any design team. Field strength falls away sharply as distance increases, so relocating a router from a bedhead wall to a service cupboard 2 rooms away achieves considerably more than an equivalent sum spent on shielded paint applied without a plan. The same logic governs distribution boards, which should never sit behind the head of a bed in any well-considered scheme, and underfloor heating in sleeping quarters, which deserves careful review at the design stage rather than an anxious retrofit afterwards. Filtration follows naturally from there. Dirty electricity filters fitted to the circuit-serving bedrooms are inexpensive, entirely reversible, and measurable before and after installation, which is precisely the kind of intervention a rigorous specification ought to favor above all others. Shielding belongs last in the sequence, and it is the most expensive tier by a considerable margin. Shielded paint, metallized window film, and in the most demanding cases, a properly engineered enclosure, earthed correctly and verified by attenuation testing, all have a legitimate place for a small number of genuinely sensitive households. A qualified survey covering radio frequency, magnetic fields, and dirty electricity across a substantial residence typically costs a modest few $1,000s, and it remains the one expenditure I recommend without qualification because it tells a household honestly whether anything further is warranted at all. Remediation of a primary suite generally runs into the tens of thousands of dollars, while a fully engineered shielded room is a different order of undertaking entirely, and I would encourage it for very few clients indeed.
Before any client reaches for shielding, I ask them to correct 3 things of considerably greater consequence first: the light, the air, and the temperature, in that order, because the evidence supporting each of those 3 is markedly stronger than anything electromagnetic remediation can currently claim for itself. Research into domestic evening lighting has found that a great many homes carry light bright enough after dark to meaningfully suppress melatonin production, while properly specified air filtration has been shown to reduce indoor particulate exposure by more than half in controlled measurement. Correct the evening light first. Get the filtration and humidity right throughout the sleeping quarters. Address temperature and sound with equal care. Only then, if sleep remains genuinely poor, does the electromagnetic question deserve serious attention. And clients who arrive at it, having already resolved everything else, invariably find the answer far easier to interpret honestly. There is a market that trades quite openly in electromagnetic anxiety, and I would treat it with real skepticism at every turn. Harmonizing pendants, stickers for the back of a telephone, crystals, and any device whose mechanism cannot be described in the plain language of physics and whose effect cannot be demonstrated with a meter before and after, belong in the category of jewelry rather than engineering. I would also resist the temptation towards total elimination. A house with no wireless connectivity and no modern convenience whatsoever is achievable, and for almost everyone who tries to live in it, quietly miserable. Electromagnetic quiet earns its place amongst the 9 pillars not because the underlying science is settled, but because worry itself disturbs sleep just as effectively as any field could. And a measured, honest survey,
resolves that worry in either direction with equal honesty. The houses I regard most highly in this respect are rarely the heavily shielded ones. They are the ones where the wiring is simply clean, the router sits at the far end of a distant corridor, and the bedroom itself contains almost nothing electrical at all. That is an old-fashioned achievement rather than a technological one, and it costs considerably less than most people fear before they begin. If you suspect the fields in your own home deserve a proper look, the responsible first step is measurement rather than remediation, and a longevity home wellness design audit begins exactly there, at ownedlifesbreath.com.